everybody in the family was like, "Oh my God, it's amazing. This is a miracle. What is this? This is incredible." I think it was beautiful because the fact that we were both doing it, and then later, within a few weeks, I started to channel, we could look to one another and be like, "Well, we're not going crazy because it's happening to both of us." When the energy came in, it was November 23rd, 1989, came through my sister first, and she started holding her hands and going, "So beautiful." She was like holding Angel Raphael's energy, and my mom was like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And my mom, who was super Catholic, was like ready to get on that phone. We didn't have cell phones at the time and dial the priest. You have to be really responsible and really careful what it is that you share with them, even if you're aligning with a specific timeline that does have a lot of probability. If that probability is negative, it's a fulfilling prophecy then of people attuning to something that they may necessarily be able to, through free will and choice and change, shift that timeline to a higher frequency.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seriously Human. I am Casey Kolodney, and we're here to talk about the seriously human experience. So, for this season, I am going to be going into a deep dive with one of the people that I love the most on the entire planet, my mother. She channels an angel. And so that has been a very unique experience for me growing up, and you can imagine a very unique experience for her. Most people know the channeling side. They know the angel and the transmissions and the message, but do they know the human side? Do they know how this all unfolded and how this ability and this unique expression has impacted the humanity of the person bringing the angel through. So that's what we're really going to get down to in this podcast, where we are going to have multiple episodes and create a whole season going deep into the human experience. And this is Seriously Human. And this is Kelly Kolodney, my mother, channel of the angel, Raphael, and other beings. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi, sweetheart. I'm doing great. Good to see you, my love.
All right, great. So, before we get started, for people who don't know who you are, what is channeling?
Great question. What is channeling? I mean, for me, channeling is a willingness to surrender, open your vessel, and allow a divine energy that's at a very beautiful frequency to move through the body and share messages.
So, you're talking about surrender and this letting go. What exactly are you letting go of? What are you surrendering in order to allow this frequency to come through you?
Ah, kind of surrendering everything. I mean, it's an enormous exercise in letting go. It requires not caring at all what people think about you. Um, it's a willingness to just open up your body to an energy and allow that energy to have its life force. Um, it's it's also very deeply intimate.
Mm, intimate how?
Because you're merging, you're becoming one with another energy. The energy comes into your body and you blend um, your your whole being, your frequency with it. So it's yeah, it's actually deeply intimate.
And the frequency that you're blending, because what it sounds like to me, and in my experience of witnessing you, is that what you're letting go of and surrendering is the ego self. And what's left is the pure essence of your consciousness that then is merging and blending with this other pure essence of consciousness that is the expression that then we receive on the other end through the YouTube video or in person or on Zoom, right? And
Mhm.
so is that what you mean when you're saying like the intimate experience of like soul essence to soul essence rather than ego character construct to ego character construct?
Yeah, all of the constructs of the personality matrix
Mm-hmm.
And the stories and the perception or even around time, all of that sort of falls away, and you're almost catapulted into the moment of of a 0 point moment, and then the energy floods in, and then you have a choice to surrender to the energy and let go, even if you might look foolish, and you don't know what's going to come out, or it could be wrong. It's a willingness to just say, okay, I'm gonna let go.
Right. And so, how did that willingness arise for you? Because so many people have such a hard time just letting go and speaking in public, let alone letting go of their entire ego construct in front of, thousands of people. So, you have a really unique story of how this all began for you. Can you tell us about that? How did you start to channel?
Well, I was 20 years old and I'm 58 now. And I was in college. And my sister, husband was a chiropractor. And since I was 12, I had gotten adjusted, and that was that. And then he started learning this new technique. It's called network chiropractic. And he was playing with it. And it was about energy. And it became really, really wild and crazy. And on the weekends, I would leave school and I would drive to my sister's house in Silbury, Pennsylvania, New Hope. And there would be people there, and we would all lay on a table, and he would use his hands and work on us. And when he was working on us, he would come over to my body and he would just touch it, oh, so very gently. Like perhaps I'd be laying flat on the base of my spine, and my body on its own without any thought would start to kind of move, like move
Mm,
with a wave, right? And then my sister, Mary Ellen, at the time would be at the table next to me, and her body would move in a wave. And then he would kind of work on all of us. And it was almost as though he was playing strings on an instrument. And as he would work on her and me, we would start to sync up, and our energy would become unified, and we would start to move together. And it was a lot of fun actually, because the energy would move through our body, and then we'd rise up and we'd both simultaneously at the same second go, oh, and then we'd stop at the same second. And then he would move the energy and we would like fall back on the table. It was kind of like playing with a puppet and
right.
sort of pulling the strings in a way. And then the energy would move through us, and then things started to shift. And I can share what happened next. But did you have a question?
Well, what it actually like, I know that you said puppet, but the visual I really got as you were expressing that in such a beautiful way was a guitar, right? Has all these different strings, and you play the strings in a way to get them to harmonize. Because you can play the guitar in a way that just doesn't sound good, right? Sound has a dissonance vibration, but it sounds like he was able to play and tune the strings, which you are, to make the room, the guitar, make the music, right? And so I just thought that that was so beautiful because that's the frequency is he was tuning you guys to this frequency. And so, yeah, and so you did it with your sisters. And how do you think doing it with Mary Ellen and Jane and Patty, what might have been different there versus if they weren't part of the equation, if it was just a one-on-one thing? Do you think that their presence was critical in allowing you to feel safe enough to be open enough to that frequency?
Oh my God, 100%. So he would work on all of us, and Mary Ellen and I were the most energetically receptive to the energy happening. Mary Ellen was 12 years older than I. She was always a straight A student, kind of like my dad's favorite, super credible in the corporate world, making, a lot of money. And so she was seen as credible living in New York, corporate, so and so. And I was in college, young kid studying, graphic design. I didn't have a whole lot of credibility behind me.
But
And
you didn't
so
have anything to lose
I had
either.
nothing to lose. But when she, I mean, then the story evolved in which, he would work on us, and then we would turn over and he would touch our heart center, and our arms would like open like this, and we'd fall back into the surrendering position, and the energy would flow. And then she started to channel. And she started to channel first. And because she was so credible, everybody in the family was like, "Oh my God, it's amazing. This is a miracle. What is this? This is incredible." And so I think it was beautiful because the fact that we were both doing it, and then later, within a few weeks, I started to channel. um, we could look to one another and be like, well, we're not going crazy because it's happening to both of us. And I think if it was just happening to her or just happening to me, it wouldn't be as valid. And it also would have been eh, like,
You're
okay,
just being weird.
like
Quit it.
you really lost it. We're calling the mental hospital. Like
Right.
you're just off the charts crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, you grew up in a Catholic family where, people went to church and everything like that, and this wasn't normal per se. It wasn't like you guys were already hippy dippy, open to the woo woo. This was like a totally out like left field kind of thing to happen. So how did everybody deal with it, and how did you feel bringing it to the table of, you know, family?
Well, everybody in the family dealt with it differently. I mean, when the energy came in, it was November 23rd, 1989, came through my sister first, and she started holding her hands and going, so beautiful, so beautiful. She was like holding Angel Raphael's energy, and my mom was like, whoa, what's going on? And my mom, who was super Catholic, was like ready to get on that phone. We didn't have cell phones at the time and dial the priest, like,
Call the
whoa.
exorcist.
Oh, yes. My sister Patty, the energy came right through her, literally knocked her over. And she was like, I want no part in this. And she just shut it down. Like, this is not happening. It came actually in the strongest to her. And she made a conscious decision. This was just not for her. My dad was just like, wow, my daughters are really, really special. Like, this is intense. What's
Right, because
going
he
on?
was so open-minded in every regard in life,
Open-minded, a
right?
businessman, but still very open-minded. I'd love to share what happened with him and his dad, who eventually came into my body. But
Hmm.
um, so everyone kind of had a little bit of a different reaction. But I think it wasn't until Raphael came through and we started really listening to the actual messages, which were so poetic, so loving, so nurturing, so kind, and so beautiful that everyone sort of like eased into like, oh wow, this is just like a miracle rather than this is something we should be afraid of.
Right. And the question that I have, which I think that we should ask Raphael, and we've never asked Raphael, is why you and why Mary Ellen and why this family? Why did this family choose to open up to Raphael, and why did Raphael choose to come through this family? It might be an interesting thing to ask. And so, without asking Raphael, what do you think that that answer might be in terms of like including Arno and Jane and you and Mary Ellen and Patty? Like, why?
It is, that's a great question because I remember when it first happened and other people in our extended family finding out. And I remember my aunt finding out and being like, well, why would it happen to Kelly? Like, she doesn't even go to church, or she's not even like all the things that like you should be doing in order to
Right.
be privileged to have this experience. Like, who is she? You know what I mean? And the only thing I can say is one, it came through my eldest sister, Patty, and she just said no.
Hmm.
So I feel like I just said yes. I surrendered. I said, okay, if you're coming and you're this beautiful and this powerful and you have this frequency that you want to share with the world, I'm all in. And I think it was a willingness more than anything to say yes, to say okay. And I think that that continued on through the development and the unfolding of the story, where Mary Ellen originally said yes, but then she wanted to keep it just for family and friends that she knew really well. Like she wasn't super interested in sharing it on a public level because there was a sense of embarrassment or what would people think or
Hmm.
right. And so I think for me, for whatever reason, I was like, okay, I'll just do it.
Right. So it's like a willingness to let go and take a risk and trust that the consequences will be ones that you're willing to handle and deal with and really relinquishing control. Right.
Yeah. And even with that, it took a period of time. It wasn't like in my 20s, I'd be at a cocktail party and people would ask me what I do. I certainly wasn't like, oh, I channel an angel.
Hmm.
Um, it took a long time to feel comfortable and vulnerable enough to be like, this is who I am. This is what happened to me. It's going to come through whether you think I'm crazy or not. That was a process.
Right. And what do you think gave you and Mary Ellen specifically a greater willingness and I guess some sort of either safety or desire to take a risk to accept it when others, given the same opportunity, like Patty, weren't willing to? Like, what is different about you two in that essence that we're talking about here?
I mean, I don't think that there was anything special I mean, if I'm to be really deeply authentic, I really feel that we had an agreement before we came to
Mm,
do some work and that there was going to be this momentous shift on the planet. And we were like, okay, we'll do what we can to bring in this energy and help. And we were on this path and this journey together. And there's something about our energies that felt kind of twin flame like in a
mm.
sense. And then for those listening, my sister passed 4 years ago. And I have to say, I was like, oh, wow, you abandoned ship. Like right when the, sh- everything was hitting the fan, things were getting really intense, and it was time to really ramp it up. And then simultaneously, I feel like, oh my gosh, she's so strongly on the other side doing her piece, and that we're energetically working together, just not in the same dimension. But why is it that we were more open to it? I just think it was part of our plan, and we agreed to it, and that we had been in a we've reincarnated in a very intense monad or soul family, certain individuals in our family that have just really were um, willing to make a difference, to serve.
Right. And one of the reasons that I'm asking you this question is that there are probably people listening to this who would like to channel or have an experience in the same way. And it's like, well, what can I do to allow myself to be open and willing to receive this? But what it sounds to me like you're saying is that part of that willingness and openness was because you had a soul contract before coming to Earth to do this. Is that what you're saying?
I think that that's a piece, but I think that the energy from when I began to channel when the harmonic convergence opened in the late 80s to now, the way that I channel is very, very different than it was then. And the accessibility to energy and frequency and harmonizing and merging with it in order to channel is the bandwidth is much wider. And so I think that people have an access to connect with these frequencies and to channel them way more than they did, say, 20 or 30 years ago. And I believe that there, and I can share techniques that one can do to merge with certain vibrations and channel and willingly choose to bring them in. Where for me, it was, I wasn't thinking about channeling, I wasn't trying to channel it. I didn't even know what the word channeling meant. It happened in a sense to me, but I think that things have shifted since then
Hmm.
quite a bit. I mean, when I was channeling back then, there were just a handful of people that were known as channelers, and now it's like everybody is channeling. It's
Everybody and
changed.
their mother.
Yeah. Oh, it's really, really changed. And I think that it's a lot easier. And Raphael had said that back in the day. She was like, you're piercing a veil and opening a spaciousness for an energy to come through, and people will attune to that vibration, and that will be carried through in the masses over time. And we're witnessing that now.
Right. And so I know that we primarily focus and talk about your experience with Angel Raphael, but in the beginning, you said like this was happening to you, right? And so why don't you tell us a story about when other beings came through and what that was like and how you handled it to get to the point where today you have control of who, which, when being you're going to channel from which dimension for what purpose, right? So, how did you go from it's something that happened to you to something that you could consciously participate in and set intentions to move in the direction that you wanted to move in?
Well, at first it was just all consuming. It just, I would wake up in the middle of the night. At the time I was living with Mary Ellen. She had a newborn. She was on the third floor of a house. I was on the first floor. We'd wake up at 2 in the morning. We'd meet on the middle. The energy would run through us, and it was just like boom, right? Her husband was fascinated by the idea that we were connecting with this energy simultaneously. Russ would put us, I remember once he put Mary Ellen in one room, me in another room. He brought in the old-fashioned tape recorder. He pressed the tape recorder. He asked Mary Ellen a question. Raphael channeled it word for word perfectly, right? Came through in that poetic, metaphoric way. Turned off the recorder, ran to the other room, asked me the same question. Raphael came in, answered the question, not exactly word for word, but I'd say 95% word for word. The same thing. We recorded it, we played it back, and we were like completely blown away because the energy was literally coming through both of us. And then at the time, we didn't even understand, well, how can energy be in your body and my body simultaneously? Like, we didn't even understand that back then, right? It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
even a concept of quantum physics or the understanding of energy in this way. And so that was, and then the energy would just come in and I'd be at a grocery store and I'd be walking down the aisle and Raphael would come in and go, ah, and then start making his, I'd be like, ah, and I'd be like wanting to like put something over my face. And I learned to put my hand on my crown and like shut it down. I remember being at a French restaurant with your father out for a really nice candlelight dinner and Raphael just coming in. I had to remove myself and go home. I mean, it was crazy. And so that was the where I didn't have so much of a choice and I had to learn how to come into relationship with Raphael and to say, these are the boundaries that I have. Like you can't show up at the grocery store and out for dinner.
Could you
Um,
share with us a couple funny stories that you have that where things would come through before you or Mary Ellen were able to hold boundaries? What are some of the like craziest experiences where you just were not able to hold the boundary in the wrong time?
oh, I mean, they're endless. I remember once being at the Philadelphia Museum and somehow coming across it was some type of religious painting. I think it was like of the Divine Mother. And all of a sudden the Divine Mother's energy just like came right into my body and I just fell to my knees and like tears started rolling down my face and I was like on the floor praying to this energy and it just looked absolutely crazy like I was an insane person. And and I remember Patty being with us, like, oh my God, like, gotta get out of here, get off the floor. But I couldn't help it. It was like the energy was just overwhelming at times, and it had its own life, And so it took time to learn how to integrate it and say, oh, that's not appropriate at this moment, or thanks, like I get that. And I'm understanding what you're trying to say, but I don't need to fall to my knees in public or whatever it might be.
Hey, beautiful soul. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Opening the Channel with Kelly Kolodney. If you find this valuable, please like and subscribe. It helps us spread the message of all of this love and the frequency of the light code. So click, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. What other stories? Come on, give us some
Hey,
more.
some more stories?
Or if you don't want to, let's jump to some of the other like you just said that Mother Mary came through you, Angel Raphael's come through you. What was a being that maybe you're like, ooh, I don't necessarily want to do that again, that you had to learn to build these boundaries up?
Oh, many. There were two that I really had to learn on boundaries, and I'll share that. And then I want to circle back to when my grandfather came into my body. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, this is going to sound strange, but an energy came in that was in relationship to trash. And I was dating your father at the time, and I was in college, and I was laying with him like in the early morning somewhere, and the this energy came in, and it just was like,
Ah.
and it literally was just like talking about all the trash on the planet, and how we had to tr clean up the trash, but it was like a trash energy. It was, and I was like, yeah, I don't want any part of that. And then one time I remember this energy that came in that had cerebral palsy, and my whole body contorted and twisted, and like, and it
Mm,
had a whole message, and I could feel as if I what had that and everything about it. And I think it was to bring compassion and understanding. And it's had a beautiful message, but it wasn't necessarily one that I wanted to regularly connect to. I remember being in the like TV room at my parents' house and this man coming in who was a librarian, and my body just got like really tall, and he stood up and he was like very and he just started like taking books off of the shelf in the den and like opening them up reading things, and he was like very academic and studious, and it was so not me, and my mother was like, "What is going on?" So, and then there was this energy who was a healer, and he would come in. His name actually was Darren, and he did a whole thing. And then I realized, oh, and then Blue Eyes came. Blue Eyes only talked about color. He was from a different dimension and planet where everything was just color. And for years, I would channel in New York City and all these places, and all I would do is talk about color and what color it meant and what color you should wear, how you should paint your room, and it was just a whole thing. And so many different energies came in, but the one that was always the steadiest, filled with the most love, the most beautiful energy that I felt in alignment with was the angel Raphael, for sure. And
mm,
so I think as a young girl, maybe it took me 6 to 9 months to really kind of weed out because I was just sort of an open channel to everything and get really clear on my intention of who and what I was aligning with and for what purpose. So those
mm,
were the energies in the early days that came through. And then probably within the first maybe month or so, and my dad was so curious about this phenomenon. He was like, well, and he absolutely loved his father so much who had passed. And he was like, well, if you can talk to an angel, can you bring in my dad?
right,
And and I remember thinking, God, I don't want to disappoint him, but I don't know. Like, I've never even met him. I was 4 when he died. I didn't know him. And then I hear my grandfather come and say, I would love to talk to your father if you would let me, but there's some things you have to do. And I was
mm,
like, well, what do I have to do? He's like, we have to wear a blue sweater. And his color apparently was blue. And you have to go up into this certain room that's painted blue. And I feel more comfortable in the frequency of blue. And it'll be easier for me to come in. So I said to my dad, okay, no, this is weird, but we're going to go up to this bedroom and you have to wear a blue sweater. And I'm going to wear a blue sweater. And I'm going to try my best. And my dad was kind of this big, strong guy, and he had big hands, and he would shake your hand. He really meant it. It would like he would squeeze it really tight. He was kind of big. And at the time I was, 20 and thin and whatever. And I sit down and my dad's across from me, and I just am like, okay, I'm letting go. I'm just gonna see what happens here. If my grandfather will come and talk to my dad. And there's kind of a lot of pressure.
right,
And all of a sudden, I feel my grandfather come into my body, and I feel elongated because he was tall, and I feel taller. And then I can feel his energy come into my hand, and he goes to reach to shake my dad's hand, who's kind of this strong guy, and he shakes and holds my dad's hand so tight that it hurts my dad, but it's through me, through young 20-year-old Kelly.
right,
Just feel tears coming down my dad's eyes, like, oh my God, this is my father. Because this young girl could never shake my hand that would ever in a million years, like,
right.
be that tight, like all
Hmm.
this strength came in. And then he started to talk to my dad, and it was incredibly emotional. And my dad, and this is really a personal story, but I'll share it because at that moment, my dad, when he was maybe, I don't know, like 8 years old. He was in the bathroom, and there was like a class window at the top, right? And he was on a stool, and he looked out through the window into the kitchen, and he could see my grandmother, his mother, kissing a man who wasn't his father. And at that moment, he just felt this overwhelming sense of shame. He loved his father so much, and he just felt this incredible sense of betrayal. And he decided he would never forgive his mother, and he hated his mother, and his mother was this horrible human being. And he held this intense, like, grudge to her, and she had also passed. And when my grandfather came, and he never told anybody this, and I didn't know this. And but he held it really deep in his heart. And he had told my mother, but it had never been shared with any of us kids. It was this thing. And my grandfather came in and he said, I'm asking you to soften your heart. You hold such hatred toward your mother, to my wife, and you must forgive her. And my dad, he's like, I could never forgive her. I love you so much. How could she do that to you? And then my grandfather said, well, do you remember that your mother and I had separate bedrooms? And he said, yes. And they said, why do you think that is? Well, because you found out that she was cheating on you and you wanted to leave her. And he said, no, because back then it's something that couldn't be said or told, but I had a different affiliation. I was gay. But yet I married and had children because that was what I was supposed to do. But your grandmother and I knew that, and we had an agreement, and she was in love with this man, and I let her have that love. And you must
Mm.
forgive. And it was so intense, and it was like such a big thing to understand. And then I started to like, flashes came in, and I think it made sense to my dad about my grandfather and who he was. And there was this incredible healing, and he finally got to let go and forgive his mother. And so that moment just felt like I could give that gift to my dad, by channeling him, that he could let go of this anger that he had and carrying with him. And so it was really a beautiful moment. And it was like, oh, the channeling can have an impact. It can help people. I think it was a realization I had then.
Right. And specifically when channeling somebody that someone has history with, but what do you feel like the impact is when channeling Archangel Raphael? Because Angel Raphael doesn't necessarily give people answers all the time. Sometimes Raphael will give context in the way of like and share information about somebody else. But what do you think the main healing aspect of Raphael is, that allows people to let go and step into their own wisdom and move forward?
I think Raphael said from the very beginning that it wasn't what Raphael says. It's about the vibration that Raphael carries. And when you're bathed in the frequency, I think there's a softening that happens, like an opening in the heart.
Mm.
And I think that there's this really deep, pure, unconditional and non-judgmental love that Raphael has, that you can kind of feel, and you just sort of feel like everything's okay or safe or something. And I think that that's one of the greatest gifts that Raphael brings.
So in a way, Raphael brings one's heart into coherence so that they can be present in the now and feel safe and in love so that they can let go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Hmm.
Hey, so if you want to tune into the frequency of the angel Raphael, we have an opportunity for you. The spring equinox is coming up, and it is an amazing time to move through portals and shift timelines. And so, if you want to taste some of the frequency of the angel Raphael and other beings, sign up for the spring equinox. It's donation based. We're going to have it on Zoom. And once we hit our capacity on Zoom, you can join us on YouTube Live. Can't wait to see you there. Beautiful. All right. So, what I want to go back to now that I think is interesting is first, you talked about where Russ had the separate recording tapes, and there was like a 5% discrepancy in the words. And then you tell this story where you channel the strength of your grandfather into your dad's hand. And, one thing I've always wondered is like, well, if you went and channeled for a Japanese person, would Raphael speak in Japanese? And it seems to me that the answer is no, that Raphael, on some level, is limited to the language that you have in your brain, whether you access those words as Kelly on a regular basis or not. Those words just have to be in your subconscious. And so, what it says to me as well when we're talking about you channeling your grandfather is that you have all that strength in you of like a grown man. It's just not accessed. It's like underneath the veil of your conscious identity. So, what do you have to share about that? And how do you ultimately prepare yourself to give the beings that you channel the greatest access to tools in order to communicate and share their message?
That's a great question. Yeah, 100%. I mean, they are using, we're blending. And
Hmm.
so the energy's coming through, and you can be the clearest, most open channel, but regardless, part of your personality is going to come through. Part of, when you're not letting go and you're trying to control, you can affect it. They're using your brain, the words that you have. In the very beginning, Raphael would literally ask me to place a dictionary under my pillow, or would take a very profound piece of spiritual literature and want me to place it there, or to skim through it, so that energetically I was attuning to more resources to pull from in order to share. And so, because I can't speak Japanese, I do feel limited in that, energetically it has to still go through my synapses, it still has to process through me.
In order to
Um,
come out of your mouth and your vessel, right? And so would
yeah.
you say that 5% discrepancy between you and Mary Ellen was just different life experience and vocab, but since your life experiences are relatively similar, growing up with the same parents in the same place, that's why the discrepancy was so small. But what it was she had life experiences that you didn't have, and you had life experiences she didn't have, and that's where she might have had words that you didn't have, or vice versa.
Yeah, it was the filter. It has
Hmm.
to come through a filter.
Right.
And I think that people will say, "Oh, you're a pure channel," or "Someone's not a pure channel," and that's just how much is being filtered through the personality matrix, and that can vary on a given day depending on how much willingness there is to just
Let
surrender,
go.
and like whatever they're going to say, versus, "Oh, this has to be a good channeling and I hope everyone gets a lot out of it," and blah 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 blah, right?
Right.
And so it just keeps coming down all the time to surrender, 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 let go, trust.
Yeah. And so you teach classes, we have the light codes and you're preparing stuff all the time. When do you notice that you give the clearest transmissions?
When I say
Screw it. So then my question
basically
is, why do you even bother preparing?
because, well, two things. I prepare so that I can let go.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And also, I prepare because Raphael can just go off on a tangent on long sentences. And in order for the mind of those who are receiving it, if there's some kind of construct that they can receive it in, that's coming based on our perception in the 3D, I think it helps them assimilate it, because otherwise it's purely energetic and really the words don't matter at all. And our mind here in this dimension, I think, still needs to perceive things through a lens that allows us to integrate it in and merge it with our thinking mind.
Right. And so I think like a good example of this is thinking of these beings in other dimensions as electricity. And what you have to do is set up the wires and the mechanism to harness that electricity in a way that is functional and useful in that moment. Whether that is you're an electric stove and you have like you, Kelly, prepare, the burners and everything for the electricity to go to heat up, or you're the light and you prepare all the bulbs and the wire and the stand, etc., so that that light hits where it needs to hit. That's kind of your role in it. And the electricity not channeled, for example, is just an explosion and it's just constantly there moving around, being stored in batteries and in different places like sacred sites or crystals. But it's when or paintings, right, in that museum in Philadelphia, but it's when you are able to plug into it and channel it through like this light that I have shining on me in a specific way that allows it to be functional in this linear dimension. That's kind of, you know, your task as a channel, right?
Yeah, 100%. You're just aligning with that vibration. And then people will say, well, how, like I used to channel only Raphael, and now so many different beings I can attune to. Over time, you can just become in move into a harmonic wave frequency with the energy you want to attune to. So let's say you want to connect with Mary Magdalene, you can tune into Mary Magdalene's bandwidth
Mm,
and come into perhaps the her skin and her hair and her frequency and her healing quality and her revolutionary vibration of being sort of a rebel, like all the different energies about her, and you start to just ask those energies to start to come in, and they all begin to form, and you tune in with your senses, and then her vibration bandwidth sort of streams in front of you, and then you can open to it and begin to unify with it and blend with it, and then share through the spoken word whatever it is that, let's say, Mary Magdalene may want to share. And so I think that when people ask today, how can I channel versus when I began to channel and the energy sort of chose me and found me, now you can intentionally choose to find it and align with it, merge with it. And I think over the years, from being what was called an unconscious channel, where I would close my eyes, Raphael would come in, we'd record it, and I would come out and have no memory at all of what Raphael said. Literally would have to play the recorder back and be like, oh my God, do you believe she said that or he said that? And two, like, oh, kind of starting to remember what Raphael was saying, like waking up from a dream and it's sort of being there, but not fully there, to, oh, I totally know everything Raphael said, 80%.
right. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing how that happened over time. But I just want to highlight that, I just remembered that you were born with a white stripe in your hair, and you did have a unique sensitivity before being able to channel. You want to tell the story about, being psychic and your dad trying to solve that, helping the police and stuff?
I mean, my dad is so funny, right? Because he was sort of like proud that his daughter could do this, and he was like
Hmm.
telling people, and it was embarrassing. So, I mean, this is kind of a weird thing, but I grew up in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and across the river is Trenton, New Jersey, and there had been a murder case there. And they couldn't find out who the murderer was, and a young girl was murdered. And I was just, home for like the weekend from college or whatever. And my dad called the Trenton police. And he said, "Oh, hello, this is Bill Sheehy. I live in Yardley, Pennsylvania, and I understand you're trying to solve a murder. And my daughter has these unique special gifts, and she might be able to help you with that." And they were like, "Sure, bring her down to the precinct."
Crazy that they were open to it at all, right?
Crazy, right?
But they're like, sure, bring her down.
Very prominent Princeton like businessman, well known in the community. I don't know if they recognize his name. Whatever, they were like, "Sure, come down."
Hmm.
So my dad calls me into the living room. He's like, "Kelly, I think we
How
need
old
to."
were you?
I was in my early 20s. He's like,
Okay.
I need to I need to use the oh no, wait a minute. That's wrong. I am misremembering. This is before I started to channel.
Right, that's why I brought it up.
Oh, okay. So I'm in like a teenager. And
Yeah. So you've always
yeah,
had a sensitivity. That's what I was trying to say.
always had a sensitivity.
Right.
Anyway, he says, because, oh, I know what because my parents played a lot of bridge and they would have people come over to play cards on the weekends. And I remember I would sit on the steps as a kid and people would come in, and in my mind I'd be like, ah, those people are getting divorced now. That lady's cheating on her husband. That person had, and then I'd say to my mom, well, and I'd tell her, she's like, how do you know these things? And I'm like, I don't know, doesn't everybody know these things? So they knew I had these talents. So anyway, my dad was always completely like, that's crazy, that's wild. So there was this murder case. So then he calls me down to the living room. He says, Kelly, we're going to the police station in Trenton because I want you to tell the police where the body
The
is.
missing girl is, right.
Yeah. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Dad? I can't do that. And what if it doesn't work? I was like mortified, right? He's like, no, just trust yourself. You got this. Let's go. Like it was crazy. So we went to the precinct and we sat down and we went in and I closed this door. I felt like I was like under arrest or something. I was like a teenager. It felt really
Right.
scary.
So crazy.
And they're asking me these questions, and I'm just, and the guy's like, and the guy, the cop, the investigator, he says, "Why don't you come in the car with me? We'll drive around, see if you can sense where."
Yeah, if you pick up on anything.
So he drives me out to this cornfield and around all these places, and I'm like, nothing. And then we would come back to the station, and I'd say, "I feel something here, like right here where we are." And he'd be like, "Well, that's ridiculous. It's a police,
This is a police
you must
station.
just
Yeah.
be picking up, blah, 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 blah." And I'd be like, "I don't know what to say, that's all either." So then I'm sleeping and I wake up and I hear under a mattress. And I say to my dad, all I have is under a mattress, right? So he tells the guy, and and then the investigation goes and they start to close the case. It turns out they find the body and it's under a mattress, like literally behind the precinct. And it was just crazy. It was just crazy.
Right. But in that moment, it's like people need to figure out how to listen because sometimes Raphael or people from the other side or other dimensional beings or just the psychic sense, it doesn't give you the full picture. It gives you a clue that you then have to trust and move towards in order to implement and execute effectively, right? And so what do you have to say to people who might come and listen to whether it is you as a channel or someone else or the light codes? What do you say to people to make sure that they can really fully benefit from the transmissions that come? Like those police could have benefited more if they trust or if they were curious or, like they could have found you know, they could have solved their case quicker, right?
Right. Well, a couple things. One, what I learned at that moment from that was it was something I had no interest in. I never ever wanted to do that again.
Right,
Ever, ever, ever. It was horrible for me because what I was doing was I was tapping into the vibration of something very dark,
right.
um, that just was scary that I just had wanted to have no part of.
Mm-hmm.
I think discernment is, and I'm not saying that people, I think it's wonderful that there are so many people who are tapped in that help solve crimes. And I think that if they're in alignment with that and that's helpful to people, that's a fabulous thing. It just wasn't for me. But I guess your question is how do people discern or use
Yeah,
the
and use like if they come to you or someone and they receive a light code or they're getting a channeling session from someone and they're receiving this like personalized insight that might not seem directly practical, just like at the police station, they're like, sure, precinct mattress. What does that mean? Screw this. This is nothing, right? How does someone, benefit from the information that might not be so crystal clear now, but in hindsight will be?
I just think just to remain open. I mean, that's
Hmm.
really all it is, right? To pay attention, to remain open and but it's very I think that this is really, really key. I am very, very against predictions. I
Hmm.
mean, Raphael will say we're in a specific time, like right now, we're in this huge evolutionary shift and all of that. But honing anything down to a prediction or telling somebody this will happen or that will happen, or I, I don't believe in that at all because we have complete and absolute free will. Timelines are always moving and shifting. And when you give somebody a piece of information that is very decisive in a specific way, what that does is that infiltrates in the other person. They believe that and they basically fulfill that destiny on a lot of
Well, they
levels.
hop on that timeline because
Hop
they tune to
on
that
timeline.
frequency that you said that they tune into the frequency that you're tuning in about their possible future.
Exactly. So you have to be really responsible and really careful when you're doing, especially a private session, which I don't do anymore for people, what it is that you share with them, even if you're aligning with a specific timeline that does have a lot of probability, if that probability is particularly, let's say, negative, I
Hmm.
think you have a very strong responsibility as a channel on some levels to not with to hold that, but to be somewhat selective because it's a fulfilling prophecy then of people attuning to something that they may necessarily be able to, through free will and choice and change, shift that timeline to a higher frequency.
Right. And there is something to it like yeah, like Joe Dispenza says, think greater than you feel. And if you're a channel or a psychic and you're tuning into someone's current energy and the probable timeline based off of the current frequency that they're holding right now, wouldn't it be beneficial for you to tune into their like the same energetic signature at a higher frequency in that possible timeline and tell them the events of that, right? And to help them tune to that. But the negative consequence to that potential is say I was tuned to that, but then it didn't happen because I was so tuned to the frequency that I was at, then it seems inaccurate and that you were total bullshit, right? So like how do we balance that, or do we just not get involved at all?
I've stopped getting involved at all. You
Right.
have to allow people to be on their journey, and there is no predicting what will or will not happen personally or collectively. You can have a map of energies that perhaps are coming into the planet at this time and an understanding of how to navigate them. But we always have free will, we always have choice. And so that's why I prefer working with the light codes and the signatures of those specific vibrations that are opening energies in the light body and activating them so that people are empowered and vibrating at a higher frequency to choose that higher timeline and accelerate their spiritual path rather than being told by an outside source. The energies comes, the answers have to and always come from within.
Right. So you're through the light codes, you're empowering them to choose that timeline rather than telling them which timeline to choose, which one does in sort of a private session,
A hundred
right?
percent. Yeah. They're choosing, they're empowered.
Right, right. Okay, so great. I think that this was a really great first talk. And what I want to end it with today is for others who might feel close to channeling, what do you want to share with them so that they might feel safe enough to do this work and to know that they're going to tap in and to ensure to themselves that they are going to tap into a high frequency, a high timeline in alignment with the highest good of all.
Intend, intend. I intend to attune to the highest frequency of unconditional love, to bring blessings to myself and those around me. That in itself is incredibly powerful. So simple, but so powerful. And then as you're tuning to that, just be aware of the synchronicities, the signs, the energies coming in. Pay attention in the present through your senses of awareness of what's trying to communicate with you. And then make a conscious decision to connect to it or not. And if there's a specific energy, let's say you're very called to Goddess Isis, for example, then feel her, study her, understand her, know her, attune to her vibration and all of her signs, symbols, energies, and frequencies so that you begin to harmonize with the bandwidth of the Goddess Isis.
Mm.
Then you become in alignment with it, and rather than you just be open to it and then it chooses you. You're not so much choosing it. So just like the energy chose me to come in and merge with me, but it wasn't a conscious choice, I think it still has the energy still has to choose you by you harmonizing with its vibration through, but now you can do it instead of unconsciously with conscious intention.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And so we're going to do this again next week. And next week, my intention is to do it on initiations because I know that you've gone through a lot of initiations in your life, moving through all of these stages of consciousness, whether it was being met by beings, whether it was the passing of a loved one, whether it was your health issues. And so I want to talk about the stories behind these initiations and how they brought you to where you are today. So everyone, that's what you can expect to listen to next week. We love you and we'll see you soon. Any last words?
Just know that you are loved, worthy, and divine. Big kisses and hugs.
There it is. Love, 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 everybody. Bye bye.
Love, love. Bye.